Hey everyone, I wanted to go over the new and exciting news that we got for Atelier Sophie 2, the Alchemist of the Mysterious Dream, that's set to drop onto the Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, and PC next month. And that's the fact that Nintendo Life went ahead and had an interview with Junso Hosoi, the series producer for a whole heck of a lot of the most recent releases in this franchise. They're going to be focusing more about the Nintendo Switch version and specifically what you can expect about this game. So if you are trying to pick up the game on PS4 or PC, perhaps this is not the best interview for you. With that said, there's going to be a link in the video description for the official interview. So right out of the gate, their first question is for Atelier novices. Out of all the people who've played the Ryza games, could you briefly explain the main differences between the secret and the mysterious branches of the series? Junso Hosoi actually responds, the Secret series had a relative high amount of action when compared to other Atelier titles, whereas the Mysterious series focuses more on careful consideration and thought. The differences between the two are even clearer when looking at their battle systems. The Secret series utilizes real-time systems, while the Mysterious series focusing on a turn-based system. Turn-based battles allow for a high level of strategy and gorgeous battle animations, so I really feel that the style of battle has a lot of charm as well, while looking to take best aspects of turn-based battles and expand on them. Actually, if you saw one of the most recent videos that I put out on this specific game, I went over the battle system and how it changes drastically from Ryza and is more akin to what the series was originally before the Ryza changes. Remember that Atelier Ryza basically shifted the way they are trying to do this series going forward, and I believe one of the biggest reasons why they are choosing to bring back some of the older games. We saw this with Lululua release, the fourth game in that trilogy, and now Sophie 2 bringing back the most recent trilogy before Atelier Ryza, is that they're trying to give turn-based players a little bit of still flavoring to the series, still a reason to continue playing it, where they are trying to change more drastically and move forward into more action combat. Their second question is, following the success of Ryza and its sequel, why did you choose to return to the Atelier Sophie in particularly, rather than any of the other games, and started with the sub-series? The response is, I'm really so grateful that the Atelier series is about to celebrate its 25th anniversary. We put a lot of thought into what the first new Atelier title would be to mark the occasion. As many of our fans have been with us throughout the long history of the Atelier series, we looked over the reactions we received on social media for each one of the past titles, as well as online character popularity polls, when we took into consideration how popular having the direct sequel with the same protagonist was. In the case of Atelier Ryza, Ever Darkness and the Secret Hideout, we began to consider making story features in Sophie and Platinum. Sophie began as a novice alchemist in Atelier Sophie, grew to be a teacher of the Alchemist in Atelier Firus, and then extraordinary alchemist in Atelier and Lyrian Suel. Between those titles, Sophie and Platinum had many other experiences, so this sequel and new title focuses on those periods. We set out to make this new entry of the series a reality, and we believe players will be enjoying it, as also being able to experience a few surprises along the way. I do find this answer a little bit interesting because I did talk about in one of my previous videos where I always didn't necessarily understand why Atelier Sophie 2 was going to be taking place between essentially the end of Sophie 1 and in between Firus and Lyrian Suel. In the way that they're presenting her here, she pretty much seems like she's coming right off the story of Sophie, so she hasn't even met Firus yet, and of course Lyrian Suel will come after that. So she's not as powerful as she once was, or she eventually ended up being, I should rather say. And always games that focus on putting characters in between turns of like another game has never really worked all that well. It reminds me of like the Batman Origins game that was supposed to be like a prequel to everything else, and it didn't quite gel with everything that had happened subsequently in that series. So this game, I always questioned it, but I guess they're trying to like justify it as well. There's more stories to tell in between these time periods, so we might as well focus on that. So they are trying to at least do their best to make heads and tails out of it. The next question reads, has feedback from Atelier Sophie or the more recent Ryza games influenced your approach to the sequel? The response is, we're utilizing all of the knowledge and skills we gained when developing the graphics for Atelier Ryza 2 in Atelier Sophie 2, where we brushed off on the fantastic elements and the game's characteristics on the Mysterious series. Additionally, we utilized the feedback we received regarding the 3 titles in the Mysterious series in order to brush up on various systems on the game by adding new battles and synthesis gameplay elements, as well as improving the overall usability of the game. And my only real takeaway to this comment would be that I hope they dial back some of the crafting elements and just the synthesizing overload you end up receiving in Atelier Ryza 2. I know they're mostly talking about the combat changes, which are good for sure, but definitely they went a little bit overboard when it came to the synthesizing in Ryza 2. Ryza 1 was very, I don't want to say bare bones because it wasn't, but it was very just kind of like, it was good enough. There was enough synthesizing focus there. Although not necessarily all that clearly displayed or explained to users. I made several tutorial videos just breaking down just some of the things that you definitely needed to get, like the flying shoes and stuff like that for hopping around from one place to another, because they weren't necessarily explained all that well. So they went the opposite route in Ryza 2. They just put way too much synthesizing, they over explained everything, and they made it kind of cumbersome. And then I hope in this game they kind of regress back to the first game, where it's a little bit more simple, not necessarily all that complicated, and they don't focus or make you do too much of it, where you spend the entirely or like half of the game just synthesizing instead of just enjoying the story and or combat. The next question reads, what would you say is the most significant addition to Atelier Sophie brings? I would say that there would be a seamless battle system that we've added. Up until now, there was a load of time going on when you're exploring the field to then when you enter a battle arena. But now you can enter battles much quicker than before. This complements the turn-based battle system well, making this new feature indispensable for this title. By implementing this feature, we have achieved a greater sense of realism and immersion in the world of the Mysterious series, as you can go directly from an expensive field arena into battle. And this is something that a lot of people just originally praised from Ryza. I presume the engine changes and the improvements to the series play a big role into this title for that reason alone. So I don't necessarily agree that just because it's a turn-based system, all of a sudden it benefits from just a seamless transition. All games benefit to this. We just recently saw with Pokemon Arceus, just not having a transition screen, it plays a huge role. It's not a big takeaway or anything like that, but it just immerses you into the game a little bit better, and it just makes it seem like a faster engagement is taking place, so that's always beneficiary. The next question reads, for new players, do you think it's best to start with Sophie 1 before playing the sequel? Do you think fans of the Ryza games will enjoy Sophie 2 as much? Then the response is, we have prepared a video to summarize the story of Atelier Sophie for players that have not yet played any of the other games. Of course, it would be great if players can truly check out the game before Atelier Sophie 2 releases, but this video will allow players that haven't played the previous game to enjoy the new entry in the series. This new title is somewhat of an episode 0 and acts as a starting point to the Mysterious series story. Every character is meeting each other for the first time, so it won't be an issue of characters of any prior knowledge come into the story. I do think it's interesting that they are doing an introductory video for, again, a series that kind of has been around. I do also think that at the end of the day, having a little bit of knowledge who Sophie is, and I guess the struggles that she does ends up going through in the other games in Fires and Atelier Lydia as well, would be beneficial to anyone playing this game. I do think though ultimately the reach for this title is not going to be selling millions or anything like that, so the reach will be very much fans of who already played the previous games, so it's not going to be that much of a surprise to them as to who she is and who Plachna is for that matter. But you know, it'll always be good to have some sort of introduction for players who don't necessarily know who these characters are. And the last question that I do want to go over is the following one. With the door now open to truly open Atelier sequels featuring the same protagonists as previous games, is there a possibility you might return to an earlier entries and characters for future sequels? The response is, Atelier Lulua, the Scion of Arland, and Atelier Sophie 2 were special cages where the timing was just right for the development team and the illustrators, along with a lot of other miracles that were all timed perfectly along these games to make it happen. Regarding new titles and sequels for past entries in the series, if the stars align right, I think there's a possibility in the future. Now, I do find this interesting that they're saying that, you know, Sophie and Lulua were pretty much the ones that were kind of lined up for this. I think plenty of older Atelier titles, definitely some like remaster, projects could be handed, where we're talking about the original games that a lot of people have been, in love with, the reason why they play Atelier games to begin with. Some of the older classic games being remastered would be something that they would love to see, and something that Koei Tecmo doesn't necessarily focus too much on. They like to make new stuff from the old franchises that people have loved. They don't necessarily focus too much on making remasters. So I think some of the older games getting remasters, not necessarily new stories, would go a long way to, maybe, testing out the water, seeing if there's like enough interest to bring in one of those older titles, maybe doing a sequel or a prequel or anything along those lines. Something that might actually connect them together, which some of the older games definitely do connect in that regard. But that's about all the questions that I wanted to go over in this specific video. There are several other questions that I chose not to tackle in the Nintendo Live interview, which of course I'm going to be leaving a link in the description below. And a huge shout out to the writer, I believe their name is Gavin Lane, for doing the interview with Junso Hosoi, the producer of the series, of course, which of course has been, doing great work on this franchise for sure. Again, link in the description below for any of the following questions that I didn't necessarily think were all that prominent or revealed anything all that important. If you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up, and as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.